Welcome to Talk Tantra to Me. It is such an honor to be holding space for this divine knowledge to make its way into your ears and lifestyle. Today, I talk Tantra with Oorja. She is the founder of Revive Style. She's a sustainable fashion blogger, designer, and artist. I'm so grateful for her content and so appreciative that she's here on the podcast to offer her perspective of living an expansive life. So thank you for being here, Oorja. Why don't you start by telling us a bit about yourself and your journey with sustainable fashion and art? How did you discover this passion and purpose?
Hi, Leola. So I'm so happy to be here. I love this podcast. And to talk about my journey, so I'm a sustainable fashion designer and blogger and artist who is based in Bombay in India. And how sustainability began for me. So I was really passionate about environmentalism since I was a little kid. I think this is the origin story of a lot of people. I saw Finding Nemo as a child, and I decided to turn vegetarian for a good decade. Then I slipped off the wagon a little bit, but I've always been passionate about it. It began with caring for animals, and eventually it spread out to sustainability and consumerism and caring about the climate and all of that. So when I was in design school, that's when I became really excited about making fashion sustainable, because I went in there because I was passionate about fashion. But for me, I think sustainability in any area of life, sustainable fashion, sustainable agriculture, anywhere, it's about taking that activity and making it more compassionate and better for the greater good. So I see sustainable fashion as an area where I can make fashion compassionate, and I can do fashion while caring about being a good person to this planet and all the other beings that inhabit this planet. So I think that's what sustainability is to me. Wherever it goes to, it's always a person who wants to change everything for the collective. They usually become really passionate about sustainability. So I think that's what sustainability means to me. And that's why I've been trying to integrate it with fashion every step of the way.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I deeply resonate with this perspective of the industry. I actually studied fashion merchandising in college as well. And I decided not to go into that. Part of the reason why I kind of shifted into other, avenues was because of the way that the industry is. And I did end up doing creative directing and some freelance writing. But the only people that I wanted to work with were people that were focused on sustainability. So I absolutely love that. And I definitely deeply resonate with this intention. And where does this bring you like today? What are your offerings? Like, how are you showing up? How are you bringing this sustainable fashion into your community?
So I love that our journey is so similar, because I studied fashion design in college. And design school taught me about sustainability, yes, of course, in one module. But design school also taught me everything that I didn't want to do in this world of fashion. So I didn't go into a corporate designing job right after my graduation. I took a year off to think about where I want my life to go. And I also dabbled in freelance writing, which is how Revive.style was born. So I started as a blogger. I didn't really see it becoming as big as it has become today. It was just like a pastime for me at first, because I'm excited about sustainability and I'm excited about fashion and I'm excited about writing. So I thought I can bring all those three together. And today I feel like what making Revive.style reach where it has today, what it's done for me is that more than any commercial or monetary gain that I get from this, I feel so excited about the fact that there are people who DM me that they tried thrifting for the first time, or they tried wearing organic cotton for the first time, or they tried any of these tiny, tiny lifestyle changes to become more conscious because they engage with my content. And I think that is what keeps me going. That's what keeps me most excited. I don't care about the size or the big scale of projects that I do. And I don't care too much about making an a huge amount of money from this right away. But I care so much about getting messages like that and knowing that in some tiny way, there's someone out there who's trying to be a little more conscious than they were before because I create what I create. So that's what makes me most excited about doing Revive.style, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is such a beautiful aesthetic that you've created. Like, I love your content and your brand. It's so beautiful. And to me, there's like this element of like sacredness that goes into the way that you share the garments and share your finds and share, the designs. And I would love to speak more into that. Is there an intention there with bringing in, like, marrying this self-expression, this adornment, or, fashion, into a space that also is offering, sacredness or a bit of spirituality? Is that true for you, or?
Absolutely, it is true. And I never started with a clear intention to do this on purpose, but it just came into my journey all by itself. And that is because my definition of sustainability, the area I like to work with, because I live in India, is that I like to empower artisans and creators in India, in the remotest corners of the country, who make handicrafts. And there are so many traditional handicrafts and so many traditional textiles. And the artists who are creating these textiles, it is a sort of spiritual and sacred practice for them to be carving wooden blocks and printing on fabric with those blocks and using natural dyes. There are artists in India who are the 100th generation of the family that is doing the same craft. So these Indian textiles, they all carry a lot of traditional and spiritual significance in our country. And I think because I love Indian textiles so much, and whenever I sell anything on my website, it's always made from an Indian textile, or it is sourced from a traditional artisan. So I feel like because of the nature of sustainability that I engage in, which is empowering artisans, the spiritual aspect of it just came in on its own. And I realized that these textiles are sacred to so many families and so many legacies where we're from, so they should be expressed in justice to that. So I definitely feel that at some part of my journey with Revive Style, the more and more I worked with traditional and indigenous textiles, the more I started connecting it to concepts of divine femininity and how sacred the process of adorning yourself is, and how fashion itself can be so sacred, because clothing is the most intimate product in human life. We wear clothes every single day, and every person in the world, irrespective of which culture they are from, they have this in common, that they wear clothes every day, whatever their traditional costume or attire is. So I think that's one way in which fashion can be so sacred and so unique to your personality, because you express who you are and what you believe in, not only in what you wear, but also where you choose to buy from. Even that says a lot about how much you care about the world, your practices as a consumer. So I think that's one point where sustainable fashion and sacred femininity and spirituality converge for me, because at so many levels, they are so interconnected, more than we ever realize.
Yeah, absolutely. So much depth with that answer. And one of the things that really hit home for me was this idea of like the sustainable piece being working with artisans from all over and empowering them. And like, what a beautiful way to keep some of these traditions and some of these like sacred practices. Like, wearing the clothing is an expression, but even I'm sure for the artisans, like the process of creating is such a sacred, like they're pouring their heart into that. And then to be able to have that shared in like the way that we're wearing the clothes and just bringing that energy into the world is just so infinite and expansive. I absolutely love that.
I think clothes which are made by hand, hand printed or hand woven or anything that involves artisans and not a machine that's churning out thousands and thousands of meters of textile. Anything that's made by hand, it has so much energy imbued in it. And you can feel that when you wear something handmade that came from artisans, you can feel that this piece of clothing carries a story and it
Mhm.
carries generations of people who are passionate about doing this. So that's so beautiful about wearing handmade.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to look at it. This fact that things that are handmade have this like life force, or like
Yes,
it's like it's
yeah.
carrying the kundalini because someone put so much of their energy into it as like, a sacred, like almost like a sacred energy exchange, or
Yeah.
between the textile and the artisan, and then the person that gets to wear that outfit. And even for like the thrifting piece as well, like I love like finding cool vintage pieces because I
Yeah,
am just
that's
in
so
love with,
interesting.
yeah, the idea that like, wow, like someone like might have, like gone to their graduation in this
Yeah,
dress,
so many
or
memories in a
yeah.
trip.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love that. And I also appreciated what you were saying about this idea of like expression, and to me like like wearing our clothing and as an expression of who we are. And so much of like how I decide what I'm going to wear in a day is like, how can I embody my highest self, in this moment? It's not about the ego. It's not about like looking good for anyone else. It's more about like, how can I be in my highest self, or how can I inspire my inner child? How do you feel about that? Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. I think a lot of times, some of us realize that we're doing this and some of us don't. But I always feel like when we open our wardrobe to decide what to wear, it's a question of who do I want to embody today? Or which part of myself do I want to express today? Some days you want to be all business-like, some days you want to be sexy, some days you want to be very crisp and very tailored. And I think this is even for people who are not into dressing up as a spiritual practice, but rather see it as a necessity. I think this comes up for them too. What you wear is who you want to be in that moment. So when you connect to that, I think your fashion sense completely changes and you can have so much fun with it because you're basically expressing who you want to be in that moment and allowing your inner child to play, like you said.
Yeah, that's so true. If I look at the choices of how I dress on a day-to-day basis, it's very much like there are a few archetypes that I play with. And like one of
Yeah.
those archetypes is for sure the inner child. And one of those archetypes is like maybe the maiden or the virginal, more energy. And then I have, the like wild woman, like cheetah print, and like the bad bitch sort of archetype. So there's, and like the queen, and there's all of these pieces, and it's so fun to be able to move through those. And I also recognize, even as, a feminine embodied individual, I will kind of lean into different archetypes during different parts of my menstrual cycle too.
Oh, yes, I know. Absolutely. I think at which point you are in your ovulation changes your mood in a big way. And I love that you have this beautiful black bodysuit with two serpents.
Yeah.
Love that. Every time you wear it, I get so happy looking at you. I wish I could find something like it.
I got it online. I can send it to you, but thank you so much. It is one of my favorite pieces. It, so much reminds me of like Kundalini and sexuality, and yeah, it's a great piece. So thank you for that compliment. I deeply, deeply appreciate it. Um, but moving through, I'm curious, in your lineages or from your understanding, how can one consciously incorporate, particular colors or design motifs into their personal style for, any particular intention, whether it's healing or manifestation, or, we were kind of speaking into this even in the idea of like finding an archetype, and like for me, one of the things that I do with my clients is like, if they're having a hard time, like really being confident in who they are, I'll have them like dress in their most, exuberant, expansive self. But yeah, are there any other pieces that you would recommend to consciously incorporate for people in their dressing habits?
So I think that one of the best things that I did for myself ever, and one of the best things that I witnessed so many other people do, is to abandon the idea of needing to follow fashion trends altogether. I really think that that is highly irrelevant now. And it's so boring for everyone to just wear the same thing because you're supposed to. And it's so much more fun if your clothing is a unique expression of you and you're not trying to fit in. So I think whoever goes through this little transition in their life, that they stop following trends and they start wearing what they enjoy and what puts them in a good vibration, that in itself is such a cool shift to occur in your lifetime, because it really changes you as a person. You become more connected to yourself and you start asking yourself, what do I like and what do I enjoy? Like for me personally, uh, I find the subject of witchcraft really interesting, and I'm so into witchy things, and I'm always reading about witches and sorceresses, and it's such a powerful archetype to look at, you know. So lately, I have started intentionally wearing jewelry and clothes and the color black a lot more, because whenever I wear stuff like that, I feel so much more in the vibration of being a witch and being magical and like making things happen, manifesting things in my world. So I feel like even if anyone has these little things like a character in a movie whose energy you love, so, or if someone's into witchcraft like I am, or so many other things, if you're into Greek mythology, think of what your favorite god or goddess would wear and dress up like that. So I think people should just start playing with what they enjoy instead of seeing fashion as a serious business where you have to look a certain way to please someone else. And that's where you find this unique style identity, which is yours. And you feel good, which is the most important thing. If you're feeling good, it shows, and you look good in any outfit that you wear, you know. So it all boils down to the simple act of wearing motifs or wearing colors that feel good to you. Like, I know a lot of women, they find red sexy, but there are women who find pink sexier. And for some, even a deep navy blue could be where they feel like they're more their highest self or most connected to their sensuality. So, I always, there's a lot of, I love wearing red, but there's a lot of people who don't connect with red as much. So I wouldn't tell them that wear red because it is universally considered sexy and then you will feel sexy. It's like, what makes you feel sexy? Maybe being head to toe in black is what turns you on and puts you in that state, So I think it's just an act of getting to know yourself better and being unafraid to incorporate your favorite colors and your symbols and your ideas into your style, and not bothering about whether other people understand it or not. It should just be meaningful to you alone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is such beautiful advice. Um, and I'd love to speak into a little, like another, layer of advice. First, just also recognizing this idea of like, what is your path? Like, what is sexy to you? Like getting clear on your truth, right? Because like wearing clothes is this like self-expression, it's communicating something. So when we can get clear, on our truth within, that it becomes so much easier to share that outwardly. And the beauty to me of Tantra and like the tantric journey is that everyone has their own path. So I just love that parallel. But I would love if you could maybe speak into, like, I feel like there's so many of us that fear wearing this, like maybe we have this like idea of this like super hot outfit, or even the dress is in the closet and she's afraid to wear this because of what people might think of her or what people might say, like who is she to be that like delicious and in her body, you know, etc. What advice would you have for someone that's worried about that kind of expression?
You know, I used to go through this too a lot earlier because of the circumstances of where I live. It's not really that easy to just enjoy wearing sexy clothes in India as much as it is in the first world. And also because of my Instagram, you know, I enjoy wearing sexy outfits and, you know, showing off my cleavage and stuff like that in my content. And I have a lot of times I received really weird messages about that, and, you know, judgmental vibes and criticism. But I think it's all boiled down to me knowing that in my head and in my heart, I have stopped seeing myself from the male gaze or from the judgmental gaze of anyone else in society for that matter. And I've started, you know, I used to have this habit of always seeing myself from outside in when I was younger. So that's why I would think such things, you know, I would wear a certain dress and I love it. But then I would think, I would view myself from the gaze of the other, and I would make my decision based on that gaze. But I would say learning about Tantra and learning about sacred spirituality and reclaiming my own relationship with my femininity, that has helped me to just not care about this external gaze at all. Because I know that when I feel sexy, it is a sacred thing that I feel. So when I'm feeling like that from inside of me, the power that the external gaze has, it just dims and dims and dims and goes away over time. You know, so I think it's all about the own inner work that you do. If you're worried about how someone else is viewing you and judging you, maybe a part of you is also viewing yourself and judging yourself like that. And when you heal that part, then what they're saying doesn't matter anymore. And then you just wear what you want, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. That last piece was so gold, that bit of shadow work and just like reclaiming the power back to yourself is so, so beautiful. And I have to say as well that, you know, when it can be difficult to like fully step in and fully
Yeah.
claim your style and go for it. And it's definitely a journey and there's layers. But the really beautiful thing is that when you do like reclaim that power and wear the thing that makes you feel alive and makes you feel like your full self, you are becoming evidence for other people to also do that. Like
Yeah.
you're
You're giving
inspiring.
them inspiration to do that. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. You're inspiring and awakening others to the possibility of being in their full expression, which is such powerful medicine that this world needs.
Absolutely. I can vouch for this that my own journey with being comfortable in my sensuality and wearing certain things that I might have been afraid to wear before, it was completely heavily influenced by seeing some woman somewhere do it. And then I thought, hey, if she's doing it and she's okay, so why can't I? You know, so seeing women on Instagram or even women in real life, um, knowing that there is someone out there who's fearlessly just showing up the way they want to show up and being okay with it, that has a domino effect, and that ended up with me being okay with it too. And in turn, now I know people who tell me that, you know, they used to be hesitant to post a certain kind of picture or wear a certain kind of dress before, but they saw something that I shared and they feel like they can do it too. So it's so cool. We all influence each other in a chain like this. Just one person has to do it and it starts spreading everywhere. That's amazing to witness.
Yeah, absolutely. And that like positive affirmation and those that are inspired by you are so much, there's so much more of that most of
Yeah.
the time than the people that are judging you. And even the people that are judging you, like it's more about like their conditioning and their own limiting beliefs and their own shame and guilt and fear about their bodies than it is about you. Like it's their
Absolutely.
problem, right?
I could tell you honestly that I have obviously once, I think all of us, most of us women go through this. There was a time in my life where uh, I was just following the program that I was taught by living in a patriarchal society. And I used to see other women being a lot more carefree in their love lives than I was. I used to see them wearing things or just enjoying themselves, hooking up with people. And I used to judge them. And when I got to the bottom of that judgment, I realized that what I'm actually feeling is that I was never allowed to do this. So why are they doing it? I don't feel okay doing it because I was taught that it's not okay to do it. So I am angry that they are doing it. That's
Yes.
what judgment is actually at the bottom of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I deeply resonate with it. And where you went with that, like if you didn't go there, I was going to say that. So I'm happy you did, because I was like, they're mad because they can't do it and they want to, and that's why they're just.
It's whenever you see someone just enjoying their life and just being free with their expression and not hurting anybody, and yet you judge them and resent them, it's a clear mirror into some wound or some unhealed aspect of your own self that wants to be expressed, but you're not allowing it to happen, and that's why you judge other people. So in this way, it's also easier to be compassionate or to just be, just ignore the people who judge you, because you know that that is their problem with themselves. It's actually not a problem with you at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful advice. I think that we've hammered that one home. Beautiful. Cool. So I would love to touch a little bit more on sustainable fashion. Like, why is this so important, and what can listeners do to be more sustainable consumers?
So I think the number one advice that I always want to give to people who want to become more sustainable when it comes to fashion is that don't try to be perfect and don't try to be the best. You cannot possibly check off all the ticks. Our world is designed in such a way, unfortunately, that it is not possible to be 100% sustainable at all. So, if you're just going to sit there and guilt yourself and be negative, like, oh, I should just not buy any new clothes ever. And, if you try to be very extreme in trying to be sustainable, it's never going to happen. And it's always better to do a few things imperfectly rather than trying to be the most sustainable person in the world. So sustainable fashion as an experience is very subjective. Which part of the world you live in, your income level, your personal style, all these factors influence your ability to do sustainable fashion. So I always tell people, do what works for you. Like, for example, in India, the thrifting scene is very new. Thrift wasn't that much of a thing here for a long time. And a lot of people also had these weird negative attitudes towards thrifting. So only now, Indian women and men and consumers have more access to thrift than they ever had before. But if you say go to London or the US, thrifting has always been a thing there, and there are these amazing thrift shops to shop from. So I always tell people that what is easy for you to do in sustainable fashion, you do that. If you cannot thrift or you don't have means to thrift, as a lot of people in India didn't all this time, then do something else. Wear natural fabrics. If you have a job that doesn't allow you to wear natural fabrics as professional attire, then do something else. Maybe borrow clothes or wear hand-me-downs, or invest in something so good quality that it will last you a long time and you don't just throw it away. So I think the best way to start becoming sustainable in your fashion choices is take a reality check about what is comfortable and easy for you in your unique situation to do. A sustainable fashion blog or a book might be telling you to do something, but it doesn't align with your lifestyle. So it's okay to not do it and do something else, because there's hundreds of ways to be sustainable when it comes to fashion, right? You invest in good quality things that last long. you shop more intentionally and mindfully. Like I really think before every purchase I make. I have stopped impulse buying things just because they're on sale. You know, you really think about what you really need and you buy only that. You thrift, you support artisans and natural fabrics as much as you possibly can. If you have a lot of money, you're very lucky that you can buy from brands that are completely ethical and artisanal and sustainable, which is a little expensive to buy from, of course. But if you are on a budget and you cannot afford sustainable fashion, you do secondhand, or you just become intentional about how many purchases you make in a year. So I always tell people, just do what works for you most easily and comfortably. Don't try to do something very complicated that you're not going to be able to stick through.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good advice. I love that there's an option for everyone. And it's really important not to make yourself bad or wrong, but to find what works for you. So I really appreciate that.
We live in so much eco guilt and eco anxiety already. So we should be trying to make it easier for us to be. A lot of us being imperfectly sustainable is better than a few of us being perfectionists about that.
Yeah, such a good point. Absolutely. So I'd love to move into chatting a little bit about Tantra and how Tantra is perceived and practiced where you're from in Mumbai, right? Or Bombay.
Yeah.
That's the same thing, right?
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't sure what part of India you were based in before this call. I knew you were there. I did go once to Mumbai 3 years ago.
Okay,
yeah.
Before the pandemic.
Right before. And I loved it. I think it's such a cool city, such like a dynamic city, just in a very interesting place. So anyways.
Mumbai is really diverse. So that makes it super interesting to be here.
Yeah.
So I have lately, I think since design school, the end of my design school, I've started researching about Indian art and the history of Tantra in India. And it's very funny that there is so much knowledge available here for people to really get into this kind of thing. And all of our art, all of our ancient texts were all about embodying a lifestyle where concepts such as Tantra and pleasure and sacred spirituality and being comfortable with sex and sexuality, it was so normal. And I don't know what happened to us, but we are so not connected to that anymore as a population. Like, if you think of our subject today of adornment, um, in Sanskrit, in a it's a very ancient language of India in which most of the important texts were written. And the word for adornment in Sanskrit is shringar or shringara. And it's very interesting that this word has three meanings, which are all equally important and interconnected to each other. So the first and obvious meaning is adornment. And in the ancient spirituality sense, it was adornment in anticipation of meeting your beloved or in anticipation of meeting a lover. So what a heroine in Indian art or poetry or literature would do when she's excited to meet her lover and she's excited for their union, and there is always an implication of being excited for an orgasm because that was seen as a very sacred and spiritual thing in those texts. So the word Shringara means adornment, which this lady would do in anticipation of all the fun she's going to have with her lover. It also means romantic love. The same word means romantic love and everything that romance includes, whether it's yearning and longing and being sad, or whether it's being super excited and enjoying your lover and enjoying your pleasure. And the third meaning of Shringara is devotion or divine love of the human for the ultimate. So it's so beautiful that these three things are connotated with the same word. And in all of the ancient texts in India about sex and sexuality of this time, these three were a continuum. They all merge into each other. So adorning yourself in anticipation of pleasure, being in love, and uh, having a sort of connection to the divine through the act of being in love. These were all the same thing. And it was like, you could say it was like a process, being ready, getting ready for your lover is not only a romantic act, but also a spiritual act. So it's really beautiful that we have all this history. But at the same time, since you asked how Tantra is perceived and practiced here today, I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but what I have seen from my perception in my lifetime is that people are really terrified of Tantra. Like they are so terrified of it because they associate the word Tantra and Tantric. Tantric means a person who practices Tantra and Tantric arts. So this is usually like an evil image in their mind, like a person who does black magic and the dark arts. And, it's actually very common in where I live. And I think in most of this country that there are a lot of tantric babas, men who practice tantric black magic, and people go to them because they want to screw with someone else. And it works. People, I have heard of so many stories in my friends' families and all that about someone having a vendetta against someone. So they went to a tantric baba and he did some dark magic, and that person got really sick or sometimes even died. It's really dangerous and it's really dark, but people do it here. So people have an association of Tantra only with this very dark and very villainous aspect of it, which is in practice. But when it comes to New Age Tantra, which is more holistic and more spiritual and more about connecting to the divine through the pleasures present on earth, so many people are unaware of that because their only impression of the word Tantra is like a man in all black with like skulls in his hand and doing evil things and messing up other people's lives. So it's really funny, all the Tantra creators and advocates and everywhere that I've ever learned about Tantra from has been white people. It's for real. I am yet to come across an Indian in India who has an understanding of Tantra, the divine side of Tantra, that is apart from this whole black magic aspect of it. So that's really sad, that there is not a lot of connection and awareness to this body of knowledge in the very country that it was born.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so wild. I like it's interesting if I think about most of the people that I know that are working in the tantric space and the teachers that I've learned from are mostly not Indian, which there's also this aspect too of like, we often use tantra as like this word that's actually a blanket for like sexual shamanism and Christian perspectives of sacred sexuality, etc. So there's that piece as well. But yeah, it's really fascinating. It's interesting when I went to India for a few years ago, I actually went because at the time I was more in the writing space, and one of my clients was a organization that freed children from sex trafficking in South Asia. And sex trafficking is an issue all over the world. But it was really interesting that when I was in that environment, I was like, it was such a big motivator for me to get into tantra and sacred sexuality, to see like how the patriarchy has taken like the concept of sexuality and made it so that these perpetrators feel that the only way that they're going to have their desires and needs met, is essentially rape. So it's really interesting, that full circle. I'm not sure if you follow Hanika. I'm not sure if that's how you say her name. Hanika Patil, I think is her name.
No, I don't know her, not yet.
She is Indian. I think she's based in she now lives in Britain, but I'll send you her info on on Instagram when we get off this conversation. But she's really great. She's very much in the white Tantra space, which is amazing. And I definitely would love to have her on this podcast at some point as well. But yeah, super interesting. Thank you for sharing your perspective.
I know, and to touch upon Tantra in India one last time, uh, I've also noticed, like, okay, everything I'm saying could be a highly subjective experience, and maybe there are many people who are into this school of thought, and it's just that I haven't met them or known of them yet. But if I know that in my lived experience, if I go up to someone and tell them that I'm into Tantra, they'll be like, "Oh, you do black magic?" Like, you know,
Yeah.
I find it really funny that, uh, when you are living in India, there is so much of uh, the the whole the whole aspect of having unhealed sexuality and being afraid of or demonizing your sexual self, that is so widespread in this country. And it's really sad because you have a country which is the birthplace of the Kama Sutra, and people all over the world visit India and they learn things and they go back and they step into their fullest power and they learn so much about their own sensuality. But the people born here are so resistant to doing that. They don't. I think that when you visit a country as a guest, you are a lot more open-minded about so many things, and your perspective is so different because you've not lived there. So you can learn so much from there and take back so much from there. But when you've grown up there and you've adopted all these negative stereotypes and all this unhealed energy of looking at sex as a bad and dirty and taboo thing, you will never be able to access the wealth and the treasure of knowledge about sacred sensuality in your own ancestry because you are so closed off to it. And that's really sad, right? If I know of an Indian person who is vocally and loudly and like actively practicing Tantra and showing up on social media and creating content about that, I just assume that they must be living in another part of the world, because living here and doing that, I can only imagine the judgment and the negativity and the resistance someone may face. So there are so much. I think it's not only unique to India. So many cultures in the world need to heal their own relationship with sensuality and sexuality. And that's why every single person doing what you do in every part of the world is so important, because only now people have started to have access to knowledge to learn about stuff like this.
Thank you so much for speaking into that. That gives me so much like motivation and also just like peace in the work that I do. So I really deeply appreciate that perspective. And I'm so grateful that we're having this conversation, because you obviously have such a great base, in your part of the world. And like, how amazing would it be if they listen to this episode and we're able to get like a different perspective, from someone that's familiar like you, and then, bringing back, practices. They just find
I've always wished that every person in India at least exposes themselves to new yourself post on your podcast and a few others that I follow, because number one, it is so easy for us to connect to all that because we grew up knowing about these gods and goddesses, and we have festivals devoted to the divine feminine every year that everyone celebrates and participates in, and the rest of the year they are just completely shut off from divine femininity. It's really sad. So I think that every person, regardless of whether they are spiritual or not, regardless of whether they get into it as a lifestyle or not, it is knowledge that needs to be heard and needs to heal so many people in the world right now.
Yeah, beautiful. I do have just a couple of last questions to round us out here. These are questions that I ask all my guests. And the first one is, what awakens your arrows? What turns you on? What makes you feel erotically alive?
So The act of getting ready is something that does that for me. I really like to take my time with doing that. Like if I have to be somewhere, or even if I don't have to be anywhere, and I just want to feel erotically alive, and I want to feel that connection with myself, I just get ready for the hell of it at home.
Yeah.
And I think, since like we also talked about how getting ready can be a sacred practice, not only for someone else, but even for yourself as an act of self love. So for me, it would be something like getting ready in a way that engages all of my senses. So I'd want my room and my dresser to be really clean and nice looking and have a candle lit. And I'd want to use, soaps and perfumes and stuff that smell good. And I'd wear fabric, or I'd use some kind of lotion on my body to feel good. And I'd play my favorite playlist. I have a getting ready playlist, especially devoted to getting ready. I think every person should have this. It really gets you in the mood. So, yeah, I love engaging all my five senses in the act of getting ready, whether it is in anticipation of meeting someone else or going somewhere, or just for yourself, to feel good, be by yourself, maybe click selfies and stuff like that. So I think taking your time to get ready and like engaging all of my senses and just making a whole ritual out of it, that gets me feeling like that a lot. And wearing the color red and black. Those are my favorites.
I love it. And I love this just concept of like the art of living is what this means to me. But I mainly want to know, where is this playlist? Is it Spotify? Is it Apple? Is it Apple Music? Spotify. Okay, great. I'm going to bother you for that. Beautiful. And where can listeners find you and or support you?
I would love it if they find me on Instagram. My handle is Oorja, Oorja dot revive style. I'll also send it to you in text so you know how it's spelled. And yeah, I think Instagram is where I'm most active and online most of the time. So I love to connect with people there.
Amazing. Beautiful. And I'll definitely put this information in the link in the podcast notes for anyone that is wanting to follow you as well. So thank you again for joining me today. And I also want to express my gratitude to the listener. Thank you once more for opening yourself up to the idea of sacred sexuality. With so much gratitude and love, have a sexy and spiritual day. And I'll catch you next week on Talk Tantra to Me. Ta-ta.